Today we're going to unpack the story of King Rehoboam. He was King Solomon's son, and his reign kicked off with all the promise in the world, but it ended in just absolute catastrophic failure. It's a really powerful story about leadership, about pride, and the kind of consequences that can follow a few bad decisions.
So let's just start with the central question of this whole story. How on earth do you lose 80% of your kingdom in a single week? I mean, think about it. You inherit the most powerful, the wealthiest kingdom in the entire region, and then poof, it's almost gone. It sounds totally impossible, but this is exactly what happened to Rehoboam.
All right, to really get a handle on how this thing collapsed so fast, we need to look at what Rehoboam inherited in the first place. He was literally standing at a crossroads, holding the keys to a nation built by his legendary father, King Solomon. But, that foundation, it wasn't nearly as solid as it looked from the outside.
Yeah, so on the surface, Solomon's kingdom was just magnificent. But underneath, it was a mess, especially spiritually. Solomon's hundreds of foreign wives, well, they led his heart astray, away from God. He even built pagan shrines for their idols. And because of this, God delivered a prophecy. The kingdom is going to be ripped away from your son. On top of that spiritual crisis, you've got a political one brewing. The people were just being crushed by heavy taxes to pay for all of Solomon's huge building projects. They were tired. They were ready for a change.
So the moment Rehoboam takes the throne, the leaders of Israel come to him with a really simple, direct, and honestly, a pretty reasonable request. They just said, lighten the harsh labor demands and heavy taxes that your father imposed on us. They weren't asking for the world. They were just asking for a little relief, and in return, they were offering him their loyalty. This was his very first test as king.
And right here, this is the moment. This is where everything hangs in the balance. Rehoboam tells them, okay, give me 3 days and I'll have an answer for you. The advice he's about to get and the choice he makes is going to decide the fate of the entire nation of Israel.
And this just lays it out perfectly. He had two paths in front of him. On one hand, you have the old men, his father's experienced advisors. They gave him some seriously wise advice. They said, hey, serve the people, be good to them, and they'll be loyal to you forever. Simple. But Rehoboam didn't like that. Instead, he turns to the young guys he grew up with, and their advice was just dripping with arrogance. They told him, no way. You got to show them who's boss. Tell them if they thought your dad was tough, you're going to be way worse. And what he says next is just, wow. It's one of the most foolish and arrogant speeches you'll ever read. He comes back to the people and says, my little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father beat you with whips, but I will beat you with whips that have barbs. I mean, you can just feel the contempt in those words. It was a flat-out declaration of tyranny.
The people's reaction was swift, it was immediate, and it was decisive. With that one terrible speech, Rehoboam didn't just deny their request, he completely shattered his own kingdom.
10. Just like that, 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel were gone. They shouted, down with David and all his relatives. They basically said, we're done. They left the coronation, went home, and their allegiance to Solomon's family was just severed completely.
Now, you'd think Rehoboam would get the message, but he seems to be in complete denial. He tries to flex his authority by sending out his chief tax collector, a guy named Adoniram. But the people weren't bluffing. They grabbed Adoniram and stoned him to death. As soon as that news reached Rehoboam, the reality finally crashed down on him. He panicked, jumped into his chariot, and literally fled for his life back to the safety of Jerusalem.
So once he's back in Jerusalem, what does he do? He gathers an army, a massive one, 180,000 men to go and force the northern tribes back into line. A brutal civil war is about to break out. But right then, God steps in. The prophet Shemaiah delivers a message. Go back home, for what has happened is my doing. God himself confirms it. The prophecy about Solomon has come true. This division was his judgment.
And so, that was it. The unified kingdom of Israel was no more. The nation was officially split. You had the 10 northern tribes, which became the kingdom of Israel, and they were now ruled by a former official named Jeroboam. And then you had the 2 southern tribes, Judah and Benjamin. They stayed loyal to Rehoboam and became the kingdom of Judah.
Now, you might think that after losing 80% of his kingdom in a week, Rehoboam would have learned a pretty serious lesson in humility. And for a little while, it actually seemed like he had. But it turns out, feeling secure and strong can be just as big a test as being in a crisis. And it was another test he was about to fail.
This timeline really shows you what happened. For 3 years, Rehoboam walked with God. He focused on his little kingdom, building up fortified cities, making it strong. But then, in year 4, the moment he feels established, the moment he feels powerful, he abandons God's law. And by year 5, the king has led his entire nation away with him. They start building the same kind of pagan shrines that got his father, Solomon, into trouble in the first place.
It's like history on repeat, isn't it? Just like his father's unfaithfulness brought judgment on the kingdom, Rehoboam's was about to bring a swift and absolutely devastating punishment down on Judah.
So check this out. In the very same year that Judah's apostasy gets into full swing, King Shishak of Egypt marches his army north and invades. This is not some random geopolitical event. The timing makes it crystal clear that this is a direct consequence of their actions.
And just in case anyone missed the point, God makes it explicit. The prophet Shemaiah shows up again, and the message he delivers is just chillingly direct. You have abandoned me, so I am abandoning you to Shishak. God was basically saying, you don't want my protection? Fine. You're on your own.
But this time, Rehoboam's response is totally different. Instead of that defiant pride we saw before, something amazing happens. He and his leaders, they humble themselves. They actually admit it out loud, saying the Lord is right in doing this to us. They accept that the punishment is just.
And that one act of repentance changes everything. God sees their humble heart and revises the sentence. They won't be completely destroyed. But, and this is a big but, they will become servants to Egypt. And God says why. So they can know the difference between serving me and serving earthly rulers. It was going to be a hard lesson.
And that lesson was incredibly harsh. Shishak marched right up to Jerusalem. He didn't destroy the city, but he did completely empty it. He went into the Lord's temple and the royal palace and just stripped them bare. Generations of treasure, all the wealth gathered by David and Solomon, gone.
But of all the treasures he took, maybe the most symbolic loss was this: Solomon's magnificent, solid gold shields. They were this shining symbol of the kingdom's glory days, its wealth, its power. And now, they were gone. What happens next is just the perfect, tragic metaphor for Rehoboam's entire reign. He can't get the gold shields back, of course, so he replaces them with cheap bronze copies. He traded real glory for a hollow imitation. And even these fakes had to be kept under lock and key, only brought out for special occasions. It was a constant, visible reminder of everything they had lost.
After his 17-year reign, the Bible gives this one final damning verdict on his life. It doesn't say he was evil because he made one bad choice or because he was arrogant. It goes to the root of the problem. He did evil because he prepared not his heart to seek the Lord. All of his failures flowed from that one central internal failure to get his heart right with God.
And that leaves us with a really powerful question, one that echoes way beyond this ancient story. Rehoboam's problem wasn't just bad advice, it was an unprepared heart. So what does that actually mean for us? What does it mean to prepare your heart? To build a kind of internal foundation that can handle not just the pressure of bad times, but also the temptations of good times. That's the challenge this story leaves us with.